Hi, good evening. I'm Dr. Philip McMillan. Thank you for joining me. And today I'm going to be sharing some thoughts about bad pharma news being buried. Why would I be talking about that? Well, it's just simply because of a recent press release from Pfizer. And I'll share with you here what it was about. And they amended their full year guidance. And I'll be going through a few of the points around this, as well as critically the disclosures that they have at the end. Just interesting points. So, before I start, I'd again encourage anyone who is interested how to prepare for the next wave of COVID. There are some people who think that it won't happen. My prediction is that it's always good to be prepared. And so there's a link below for you to join one of our discounted courses. So really look forward to having your support. So getting back to the question, bad pharma news buried. Well, why did I say that it was buried? And I'll show you quickly what this question was around. And it was when we looked very carefully at this announcement. This was done on Friday, 13th of October at 4:30 p.m. Friday at 4:30 p.m. I have been reliably informed that when you're doing a press release, you usually want people to read it, and therefore you would try not to produce it at a time when nobody's going to read it. So the question there is, that's the standout question. Well, why would you produce that on Friday at 4:30 p.m., just in the middle of a global crisis that is taking over all of the news? So there are a number of things happening, and this is what oftentimes politicians will do when they're trying to bury bad news. So my question was just simple. Well, why were they talking about it at all? Why was this not put at a time when more people would have been aware of it? Was there anything relevant? It didn't seem as though it affected their market share, so it can't have been anything necessarily that was financial. And the main point that was being highlighted, and I'll bring this up here for you, is in the video here that was done by Albert Bourla. He was talking about the fact that there was an opening of the European markets with regards to Paxlovid, which would therefore give greater access to people to have this coronavirus protease inhibitor, which has had mixed results in terms of the benefit across the population. So that was a big part of what they were talking about. But let's go into a little bit more detail. And I've highlighted a few points just to make it a little easier for what I am thinking could be relevant. So again, we have here this Pfizer document here, and again highlights the time 4:30 p.m. on a Friday in the middle of a major international crisis. Who is going to be looking out for this? So why produce it here? So let's go through in a little bit of detail. I've highlighted a few things. So the first thing is that they've highlighted here their full year updates for 2023. They're revising their revenue range to 58 to 61 billion due to COVID products. And this is because they're reducing the guidance for Paxlovid revenues by approximately 7 billion. And they're looking at a return of approximately 7.9 million treatment courses of government inventory. So this would be due to the stock of vaccines that were being returned to them, and so in effect they then had to get back some of this uh, quantity of stuff, and this has an impact on their share price. And when you look in more detail at their table here, and I'll show this to you here, this is now highlighting as well they have revised it from 67 to 70 billion down to 58 to 61 billion. So this is by about 10 billion revision down. And when you look carefully at, as I said, 4.2 billion of non-cash revenue reversal return related to the return of treatment courses of Paxlovid, and as well a non-cash 5.5 billion inventory write-off of other COVID products, as well as lower than expected vaccination rates for Comirnaty, which is the Pfizer mRNA vaccine. So all of this was happening, and you would think this is actually good news. It's good news in a sense that less people were perceiving that they needed a booster and less people were using Paxlovid. Was that really because we had less coronavirus, or was it just because there was no testing going on? And so, therefore, people weren't even aware that they had COVID and therefore weren't using Paxlovid. That's one of the drawbacks with regards to not testing and measuring. While we don't want to be completely scared about things, at the same time, we want to be well understanding of what is going on around us. So getting back to the press release here, you have here they were now. This is now the bit that I'm interested in, and this is the part here where we have a degree of information about the vaccine. So they're now giving us more important safety information here about the vaccine, allergic reactions, and so on, which we know. I've highlighted this here. Myocarditis, inflammation of the heart muscle; pericarditis, inflammation of the lining of the heart. And they have said here myocarditis and pericarditis following the vaccines have occurred most commonly in adolescent males 12 to 17 years of age. And in most of these individuals, it began a few days after vaccination. They went on to say the chance of having this occur is very low. Now, the problem I've had with that is because that's in terms of clinical or overt myocarditis. But we know quite well that subclinical myocarditis can be quite an issue and shouldn't necessarily be underestimated. And they highlight in here some of the important things that affected people can have, including chest pain, shortness of breath, fast heartbeat, and pounding heart, for which they must seek their doctor. The other thing that stood out to me was the question about what you should tell your vaccination provider about your medical conditions. If you have any allergies, if you have myocarditis, that makes sense. If you had a fever, if you're on a blood thinner. This one caught my attention. Patient is pregnant or is breastfeeding. Now, we are using the vaccine across the board in pregnancies. And one of the things that I have always been concerned about is that they haven't differentiated the risk. They've treated all pregnancies as high risk, not recognizing that in reality, the data highlights that older pregnancies, pregnancies with comorbidities, pregnancies with obesity tend to be the ones that have more severe COVID 19. So, my question, similar to what we saw in terms of targeted vaccination across the population, a young female with no comorbidities has a really low risk of severe disease. It's not the same as an older male who is probably Black or Asian with much higher risk in terms of severe COVID 19. So, these are points that we didn't see highlighted enough in the pandemic. So when we go down to disclosures, and disclosures are usually things that they have to share with us. So this is what the FDA would say. This information has to be shared. You can't not share this information with the public and investors. And so this information they had to disclose with regards to investors as well. So they have recognized the fact that there are risks associated with preclinical and clinical data, including phase 1, 2, 3, and phase 4 data for Paxlovid and Comirnaty, that's the vaccine, and any of Pfizer's other products or candidates. And in any of these studies in pediatrics, adolescents, adults, or real world evidence, including the possibility of unfavorable new preclinical, clinical, or safety data. And this is really the point: new possibility of unfavorable new preclinical, clinical, or safety data. And this is something that is really a simple question. And whenever you are having a discussion with anybody about it, it's important to acknowledge that we don't have long term safety data. Now, some people may argue that it's a vaccine. All of the vaccine complications tend to occur quite early in the first 28 days. Well, we know from the H1N1 vaccine that actually one of the problematic side effects, even though it was rare, was narcolepsy. And that could take up to a year before it presented. My argument has always been the big risk in the context of COVID 19 is that this disease is behaving like a viral mediated autoimmune disease. If you mix any kind of immune stimulation in that, you have to then suspect that you can hit complications down the line. And this is essentially all that I have been concerned about from the beginning of the pandemic. If you don't fully understand the disease, if you can't fully explain the mechanism of the cytokine storm, if you can't understand why there is rising autoimmunity, even from just infection, as well as increased autoimmunity around vaccination, how then can you be sure about the longer term impacts? That's where my position has been. And that's what I keep on saying over and over again. It's very difficult to not say what the research is pointing to. And the research is pointing to the fact that we are likely to see significant uptick in terms of autoimmunity over the next few years. It's very concerning, has a real impact on patients, and it's something that we should all be very, very concerned about. So that's my quick summary today. I hope you take a look at the document and see if there's anything else that was missed in terms of news that you would do on Friday at 4:30 p.m. in the middle of an international crisis. Most people would have missed that. I hope that you find something useful in it. Have a great evening. Thank you.